Main man, made man here. Y'all know how I get down. We talking boxing. You know, I remember when Daniel Jacobs first linked up with Eddie Hearn a fight or so ago, and that was big news around the boxing world. And the first thing that I said in my video about it was, yo, it's good. You know, we welcome Eddie Hearn here in America, his invasion to American boxing, but we ask that you do not bring your protection program. That's all I've ever said. People have given me crap over time and said that main man, you tripping, man. What Eddie Hearn does with Anthony Joshua is amazing. And I stated that what Eddie Hearn does with Anthony Joshua is run a protection program. You know what I mean? And clearly with Daniel Jacobs, we see the same thing playing out all over again. Hear me out, ladies and gentlemen. See, you look at this situation that's going on, right? And the thing that brought this video on is when I heard the word that the WBC had ordered for Jermall Charlo to face Hugo Centeno Jr. for basically the mandatory position to get the winner of Canelo and Triple G, in which Triple G is the WBC champion. So Jermall Charlo is involved in basically an eliminator fight for the interim title to become the mandatory. Now he's rated first. Canelo Alvarez is rated second in the WBC. Daniel Jacobs is rated third, and Hugo Centeno Jr. is rated fourth. So the question I had come up with is, why wasn't Daniel Jacobs proposed to face Jermall Charlo? Now, I understand the politics involved in this. The politics is basically Jermall Charlo fighting on the Showtime side of the tracks, and Daniel Jacobs, by him getting with Eddie Hearn, also signed an exclusive 3-fight deal or so multi-fight deal with HBO. So I get it. But however, I'm not sure that Jermall Charlo is exclusively locked in with Showtime. I know he fights for Heyman. I know he fights under the PBC umbrella, and I know majority of his fights are on Showtime, but I'm not sure if he's exclusively locked in. Now, the thing is, though, is that, if it wasn't the case, Eddie Hearn had already laid the groundwork, because when Daniel Jacobs fought Luis Arias in his last fight, which was his very first fight for Eddie Hearn came out right before that fight and stated that, yo, we not even thinking about Jermall Charlo. Like, we're not even thinking about Jermall Charlo. How you not even thinking about Jermall Charlo, man? Like, Jermall Charlo is a heavy name at middleweight right now. He's clearly doing his thing to get to get into a mandatory position. How could you not be thinking about Jermall Charlo? Especially if they could have made this fight happen, it would have put Daniel Jacobs in an official position to become the mandatory to Triple G and Canelo. Now, that is the goal right there. The goal for Eddie Hearn is to get Daniel Jacobs either in a fight with Gennady Golovkin in a rematch, or either get him in there with Canelo Alvarez, right? Now, forget about fighting everybody else. We just worried about that. And that's the same way he does with AJ. When he laser in on an opponent, forget all the other credible guys that's around him. We're going to laser in on this one particular dude in general. You know what I mean? And that's the protection program I be talking about for whatever reason. Now, Daniel Jacobs, clearly, that is the bigger fight, Triple G or Canelo, no doubt about it. But there ain't no reason why Daniel Jacobs shouldn't be facing Jermall Charlo, man. Like I said before, man, he has a good working relationship with Al Heyman. He's a former Al Heyman fighter himself. He has a good thing with Showtime. I don't know, man. And then you look a little further. Okay, now, Eddie Hearn puts Daniel Jacobs on HBO. So this should open up fights for Billy Joe Saunders, I don't know, Demetrius Andrade, of course, Canelo and Triple G. And also, but then now I don't know who to fault, whether it's, Daniel Jacobs or Demetrius Andrade here, because Demetrius Andrade is acting like a straight skirt right now, and he's pulling that same jazz he pulled down at 154, where he's not facing nobody at 160 either. He was faced with the question of, Billy Joe Saunders wants to face you. Do you want to face Billy Joe Saunders? And he come out and says no. He want to face Gary Spike O'Sullivan instead. He feels as though he has to grow more for the weight and put on more muscle. But I'm like, yo, what the heck is Demetrius Andrade talking about? He was always walking around well over 160. I mean, on top of that, I believe he's already had a fight at this weight class. Like, he's already fought. I don't know, man. But, that fight ain't happening. They're on the same networks. I don't know if it's Demetrius Andrade that doesn't want it. But clearly, Eddie Hearn isn't pursuing that fight. Now, you look at Billy Joe Saunders. He's coming off this big win against David Lemieux. He fights on HBO, right? And that fight should be possible. But however, Eddie Hearn has a beef with Frank Warren, who's the promoter of Billy Joe Saunders. Now that fight ain't possible. the politics involved in that, man. See, the thing is, Eddie Hearn needs to bite the bullet. Daniel Jacobs is not a popping like that fighter. Like, we know who he is, but he ain't popping where everyone is kicking in the door to get him into a fight. So you need to get him out there, man. Eddie Hearn's promise was, I'm going to make him a star in the U.S. Well, from what I'm hearing, Eddie Hearn wants Daniel Jacobs to face Gary Spike O'Sullivan also in his next fight. What? Gary Spike O'Sullivan is on nobody's radar. Top 10 of nothing. He's from Ireland. No one in America knows him. Why is Eddie Hearn pursuing a fight with Gary Spike O'Sullivan for Daniel Jacobs? Now, in Demetrius Andrade case, at least he said that, I'm trying to get accustomed to the weight. You know what I mean? Still ain't credible in my opinion, but it's, it at least provides a subpar, okay, I understand the reason, but in Daniel Jacobs' case, why isn't he facing, say, Jamal Charlo, or even if you look in the IBF with Darianchenko just coming off that victory against Toriano Johnson? He's rated first. He's in the mandatory position. Well, right up under him, Daniel Jacobs is there. Yes, I understand Darianchenko fights on this Showtime most of the time, and yes, he fights under the PBC banner, but still, man, once again, Daniel Jacobs and Eddie Hearn have a great thing with Al Heyman. Why ain't that fight going down? What is Eddie Hearn doing with Daniel Jacobs, ladies and gentlemen? That's all I'm wondering. And, when he fought Peter Quillen, which was a good fight, he did that under the PBC banner. Even the Moore fights happened under the PBC banner. But since he's been with Eddie Hearn, we've gotten Luis Arias, and now they're talking Gary Spike O'Sullivan. How many fights did he sign up with this outfit anyway? I think it was 3, if I'm not mistaken. Well, if that's the case, then he got 1 more left. Who's it going to be? You know what I'm saying? So, protection program, man. Clearly, Eddie Hearn's ambition and agenda is to get Daniel Jacobs to either Canelo or Triple G, any means necessary. He's going to clearly be willing to throw the bag out there, which is another reason why Daniel Jacobs shouldn't have a problem with getting nobody else in the ring, because he has a money man behind him. Eddie Hearn will open that bag up, man. I just don't get it. Why is he not trying to fetch out better fights for Daniel Jacobs? How are you going to make this man a star? How are you going to make HBO fall in love with Daniel Jacobs when you're bringing him Gary Spike O'Sullivan? How is even HBO okay this? So this is very unfortunate, man. This is very, very unfortunate because, there's a lot of good fights that lie up at middleweight for Daniel Jacobs, and he can keep himself in the mix. He doesn't have to fight these low named contenders just to kind of keep his positioning safe or whatever they're trying to do. They don't have to do that, man. Like, you can raise the radar on Daniel Jacobs. Daniel Jacobs, I believe, will be willing to get in there with a lot of these guys. I think it's Eddie Hearn that will hold him back. It's the same thing that he's doing with AJ, man. He's picking and choosing. He's picking and choosing to keep certain positionings. He's picking and choosing the more. He's looking for hopefully a weak fighter or a weak champion, somebody he can capitalize off. In this particular case, he's using Daniel Jacobs as a money tool. He wants that big fight. And nothing else matters. That ain't cool because Daniel Jacobs right now needs to put work in. A lot of people are not so. Daniel Jacobs is a very, very good fighter. Don't get me wrong. But he has losses, and he lost to Golovkin and he lost to Pirog. When you're losing to these guys, you got to keep your name and you got to keep fighting good fighters to show everybody you are the real deal. And you keep putting them in there with guys like this, Gary Spike O'Sullivan. Come on. So we'll see, man. No protection programs, man. I've been saying that for the longest. Clearly, Eddie Hearn isn't protecting his investment. If Daniel Jacobs was to take a loss right now, that would be bad for Eddie Hearn and Daniel Jacobs because that would just be very, very bad. He would not be able to move Daniel Jacobs to no Triple G or Canelo fights. And that's clearly the objective. So, not cool. If you're a fan of Daniel Jacobs, I know you want to see him in there with better names than Gary Spike O'Sullivan. And I know you want to see him do more than just sit around and do basically nothing while he's waiting on a Golovkin or a Canelo fight, which is a fight that ain't promised because he is in no mandatory positions. They're going off the performance that he did against Golovkin in which he lost. Though it was a valiant performance, he lost. They're using that to try to sell a rematch or maybe a fight with Canelo. Well, I don't think they would take that fight over the mandatories, in my opinion. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So to the next video, Main Man, Made Man. Don't forget to subscribe to Twitter, Made Man 511, Facebook, Main Man, Made Man, Boxing Forum, Google Plus, Main Man, Made Man. Can't blame. I mean, Daniel Jacobs was doing much better under PBC, in my opinion. At least Al Heyman, though he was feeling in between, he wasn't. At least he did give us Peter Quillen in the Moore fights. You know what I mean? This here, man. And did he? Yeah, and he even made him back took him to the Golovkin fight. So, And then even in that particular case, Daniel Jacobs was a PBC fighter, and he fought a lot of his fights on for the Showtime networks. But they managed to make a Triple G and Daniel Jacobs fight. When the fight is big enough, they will make it. You know what I mean? And that's the same way with Jamal Charlo, and that's the same way with Derevyanchenko. Though either one of those men against Daniel Jacobs is a big fight. But I don't know. The protection program says otherwise. To the next video. Peace out.